Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm here today with Chris Heighes, who's a senior consultant here at URM. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider. So Chris and I are going to be talking about Service Organisation Control 2, more commonly known as SOC 2 today. And my first question for you, Chris, is what types of organisation should be considering a SOC 2 audit and what does it involve?
Hello, everybody. Essentially, a SOC 2 audit is designed for organisations that provide services to other organisations. And essentially, a SOC 2 report acts as a method of assurance around information security and the security of the services that you're delivering. Historically, SOC 2 was developed by the AICPA, which is the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So historically, it's tended to be a audit and a reporting mechanism that's been utilised in the States. So we've tended to find that organisations that have wanted to sell their services, UK or European-based organisations, but have wanted to sell their services into the US market, potential clients have put it as like a prerequisite that they would like to see a SOC 2 report for the specific service. Increasingly, we're seeing that SOC 2 reports are seen as a really good method of assurance for organisations almost throughout the world. So increasingly, when organisations are bidding to deliver a service, they're finding that their prospective clients, when they write their lists of requirements, SOC 2 report is one of the nice to haves in that list. So really, it's organisations that are delivering services which relate to information security in some sense. So they're going to be processing client information or having access to client information. Historically, it was primarily in the USA, but increasingly, it's becoming a nice to have for a lot of client organisations throughout the world. What does it involve? Surprise, surprise, it involves an audit. The audit is an evidence-based audit. It's if you're an organisation that already has an ISO 27001 certificate, the audit will cover similar types of areas, but I think it's absolutely fair to say that the audit is likely to go into much more detail. The audits don't just want to look at policy and process documentation and perhaps a couple of examples of the process in action. There's a much more sort of structured way of sampling evidence. The levels of technical evidence that are required are much deeper as well. Typically, once an organisation has had its first SOC 2 report, it becomes an annual process. So essentially, you have to go through an annual audit to ensure that the SOC 2 report you have for your services is up to date. And I guess the last thing to say on this topic is that SOC 2 reports are service-based. So again, unlike a standard like ISO 27001, which quite often is seen as a foundation information security standard for entire business, there is absolutely no issue with a SOC 2 report being for just a very specific service or group of services.
So you started to touch on the idea of a SOC 2 report like providing assurance for potential new businesses and existing customers potentially. Could you dive a little deeper on what the benefits are for organisations of having a SOC 2 report?
Yes, yeah, and I mean essentially these benefits are why the SOC 2 reporting is becoming a much wider approach to assurance. If you look at a SOC 2 report, it is very detailed. It includes a section which describes the system that is utilised to deliver a particular service. So it goes into details about the technology that's utilised, third parties that are involved in delivering the service, the types of technology and approach, whether it's a cloud-based service or whatever. It also includes details about how the organization is structured, how the control framework of the organization is structured. So that section of the report gives an awful lot of detail, not just about how the service is delivered, but also how supporting functions within the organization operate to support that service as well. So it goes into a lot of detail there. The second part, especially if you're looking at a SOC 2 Type 2 report, the second half of the report is a detailed breakdown of the actual results of the audit, whereby it goes through the individual points of focus from the SOC 2 standard, and details the testing that was undertaken and what the results of that testing were. So if you're a client and organization and you receive a SOC 2 report or have visibility of a SOC 2 report from one of your suppliers, the benefit it gives you is that it gives you a lot of detail about how the service is secured, how the service is delivered, as well as assurance that the control framework that the supplier organization is operating is effective. And probably the best way to sort of give an indication of the level of detail that testing goes down to is the fact that again, if you have a SOC 2 Type 2 audit, if the auditors identify when they sample, for example, joiners to your organization over the last year, they will take a sample, and if they find any issues with that sample of joiners, so that if they find one joiner hasn't done a full induction, hasn't done all their information security training, that will be documented in the report as an exception. So whether this is a good or bad thing, I don't know, but the report, there's no hiding place with the report. It's very detailed, and the testing involved in the audit is very detailed, which means that the benefit is once you've got that SOC 2 report, it really does provide a good level of assurance to your current clients or your prospective clients about your information security framework and how you're delivering your service.
I've heard the phrase "the ultimate form of assurance" used around SOC 2 before. Would you say that's sort of an accurate reflection?
Yeah. It's probably SOC 2 auditors saying that, in fairness, but yes, it's. I mean, I'm a big fan of SOC 2 auditing, SOC 2 reports, for the reason that they are so detailed, they are so comprehensive, and they're really getting to the nub of what clients want to understand about the service that's being delivered and how that service is supported.
And what are the typical challenges organizations face when they're preparing for their first SOC 2 audit?
Yeah, it's not going to surprise you that the biggest challenge is it's a very detailed audit and a very detailed report. So organizations sometimes underestimate a little bit the amount of effort that's actually involved in preparing for a SOC 2 audit. It's not a case of just identifying your processes and procedures and ensuring that they're documented. It's about understanding how you can evidence the effective delivery of those processes and procedures, and that evidence can be documents, evidence could be records, but that evidence can also be configuration information from your systems and your services. So absolutely, one of the challenges is getting clarity about exactly how you can actually evidence your controls and your processes, and how you can do that in a way that is clear to the auditors, that they can, from the requests that they've made for evidence to what you actually deliver, you need to be in a space where there's clarity about the fact that you are actually answering the questions of the auditors. One of the other challenges is that sometimes organizations assume that a SOC 2 report is going to be completely about technical controls. There are also requirements in SOC 2 around being able to evidence how the organization is governed. So how the board of the organization or the senior management of the organization get visibility of the effectiveness of processes and the operation of the organization, how they cascade down objectives and strategies for the organization, how the organization communicates internally and externally. Sometimes, especially with organizations that have maybe got an ISO 27001 certification, they sort of miss the fact that SOC 2 is wider than just technology controls and those ISO 27001 controls. It covers areas, as I say, of governance. It covers areas around how you manage the entire life cycle of your employees. So not just their onboarding and offboarding, but how you manage their performance on an ongoing basis, how you manage their training on an ongoing basis, those types of things as well. Initially, when you first look at going for a SOC 2 audit, there's the inevitable challenge of working out what the scope is. As I already mentioned, it's service-based, so it's determining exactly what services are going to benefit from undergoing a SOC 2 audit, exactly what supporting services need to be included in that scope. So your HR services, your broader IT services, and how they support your services. That needs to be understood. It needs to be understood what trust service criteria are going to be included in your audit. There's 5 trust service criteria, of which 1 is mandatory and the other 4 are optional. And sometimes organizations struggle a little bit to absolutely understand which of the optional trust service criteria are applicable to their service. So there's a little piece around that. The final challenge when you go through initial audit is determining what the reporting period should be. There's fundamentally with SOC 2, there's 2 options. You can have a type 1 or a type 2 report. A type 1 report is very much a point-in-time report. A type 2 report is a report that is looking at the effectiveness of your process controls over a specified period. Typically, that period has to be at least sort of 3 months, and the maximum is a year. So there's that challenge of trying to determine, being sure that you understand how long your controls have been operating effectively for. Because fundamentally, it's probably better to be initially going for a type 2 report that covers 6 months, where there's not going to be any exceptions, than trying to go for a 12-month initial reporting period, where the first 3 months of that 12 months, the controls weren't operating effectively. So it's understanding your controls, understanding how you can evidence your controls, and being very clear how long those controls have been operating effectively are the key aspects. And that challenge of remembering that it's not just a more detailed ISO 27001 audit, it's a wider scope than that, as I said, around things like organizational governance, around some of the people management aspects as well.
Does all of that get a bit easier in subsequent audits after you've done your initial one?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, inevitably, if your service and everything that supports your service is staying fairly consistent, then typically year on year, you're delivering very similar types of evidence. And I mean, even down to similar types of screenshots of configurations of tools and things like that. In saying that, it still takes quite a long time because you still have to collect all that evidence fresh. It's not going to surprise you, the auditors aren't going to accept evidence that's outside of a reporting period. So each year you have to provide a new set of evidence, and the sheer quantities for a typical SOC 2 audit of evidence that you have to provide does mean that it typically takes a period of weeks rather than days to deliver all of that evidence. And typically it involves a range of individuals across the business being able to bring that evidence to the table as well.
Thank you so much for your time, Chris. And for our listeners that want to learn a little bit more about SOC 2, Chris has written a blog on our website, urmconsulting.com, which is called SOC 2 Explained. And he covers everything that we've talked about today, but also a couple of other points as well. So do go and give that a read. Thank you for listening. If if you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.